Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys. All right, trying to learn more about the European Union. If you look in a lot of lists like GDP per capita, or just GDP lists, or population, or some kind of global economic military kind of list that you'll see on like Forbes or whatnot. Sometimes you'll see the EU, sometimes the EU with an asterisk. Like I think the highest GDP list I was looking on Forbes was like the US, EU, China, or EU, US, China, or US, China, EU, something like that. And so sometimes it's kind of seen as a country, but at other times it's just a group of countries, not quite the level of states like here. Trying to learn more. All right, my name's Connor. Original link to the video. I pointed at there's the door while I was saying there's the door if you're not ready to learn. Home X down the hall, get out. Original link to the video, top of the description. Right below that, link to the Discord. Love to have you. Click on it, send it right over there. Don't worry if you don't get a role right away. I will check and promote you. We are pretty nice over there. Usually, most of the time. No, they're great. Let's go.
Being a citizen of the European Union means that many aspects of our lives are regulated by a weird entity. It feels like a huge bureaucracy is making decisions over our heads. Many Europeans think that their vote in the EU elections doesn't count and that the EU is not democratic. How democratic is the EU really? And does your vote actually achieve anything? In democratic states, public policies are based on the will of the people. But the people are not a coherent thing.
People trademark.
Countless different groups are battling for influence and power to establish laws and rules that benefit them. In a working democracy, there are checks and balances that are supposed to create a fair environment where these battles can be fought. Term limits stop factions from dominating too much. But all of this ends.
I thought it was very simple, but I feel like that last 20 seconds of him talking said something very important, and he said it very well.
At our borders. International politics are not democratic, but anarchic. No central authority is powerful enough to ensure fairness or enforce laws, so the only law is the tyranny of the strongest and anarchy. So for most of human history, powerful countries took what they wanted from others, either by extortion or by violence. After World War II, the United Nations were founded to overcome this anarchy by establishing rules on how countries should behave. But since the UN has virtually no power and its members often have opposing interests, it's usually politely ignored. The EU is a construct that tries to have rules and laws for its member nations that are actually enforceable, as the European Court of Justice is able to make binding decisions. Originally, the EU was founded to ensure peace between European nations and prosperity for the continent. But it's also an attempt to gain international power for its members. It's like a superstate, and it's striving to...
Question. So if there's some EU law that some entity within a country or a country itself is not abiding by or breaks one of the laws, are European officials that are not from, let me just pick a country, say Italy, just I don't know, Italy, just came to my mind, random country. So Italy, either a group in Italy, government entity, or just like, the government of Italy didn't follow some sort of these rules, and so you'd have to enforce it at the end with a stick, if you know what I mean. Like laws in the end always have a threat of punishment, and so would it be officials from the EU that aren't Italian going into Italy and then deciding judgment? Because that almost seems like a sort of like an invasion type sort of thing. Unless it's more of a federal government type thing like it is over here in the U.S., where it's known that, hey, states have state laws, but the federal government can come in and do what they want to if they have to. But you guys aren't the United States or the EU, and so I feel like this might... does it breed any sort of resentment if there are Does that make any sense?
To be democratic and legitimized by all of its citizens. To do that, it has to solve the problem of different actors wanting different things. Only that its members are countries with very different priorities. So, how does this work? Since the EU is ridiculously complex, and politicians are even worse than scientists at naming things, we'll simplify massively and omit a lot of details. You can find further reading and explanations in our sources document. Okay, if you want to create a democratic union of independent nations, you have two options. 1. Let everybody vote for national politicians who then make decisions for the union together. Or 2. Let every citizen vote directly for an independent institution that's able to make binding decisions. Both approaches have their upsides and downsides.
An independent...
that's able to make... Let every citizen vote directly for an independent...
So I get this one, is you have representatives from each country, you know, who all have a say in a vote. But what is he saying?
Together. Or 2. Let every citizen vote directly for an independent institution that's able to make binding decisions.
So that independent institution that would make binding decisions would no doubt... would that independent institution be equally represented from people from each country, or would it simply be candidates would be shown, all of Europe countries would vote, and whoever that is, they'd stay in power forever long and make the rules? Is that what that means?
Both approaches have their upsides and downsides, and the EU ended up with a mix of both of them. Next to the European Court of Justice, there are 4 main institutions that we'll talk about today. The European Council, which is made up of the heads of government or states of the member countries. The Council of the EU, with ministers from the member countries. The third one is the European Commission, which is the de facto government of the EU, having one commissioner for each member state. And lastly, the European Parliament. The Parliament is the only part of the EU that is directly elected by you, dear citizen, in the European elections. In principle, all of these institutions of the EU originate from your direct or indirect vote, be it at the national or EU level. But some do...
European Council, Council of the Year.
Direct or indirect vote, be it at the national or EU level. But some do more than others. For example, you vote for your national representative and therefore contribute to form a national government whose head of state has a seat in the European Council. These leaders choose the president of the EU Commission and its fellow commissioners, who eventually are confirmed by the EU Parliament. So this is a sort of indirect democracy. Therefore, more than or indirect
this
vote,
is what I think
be
it
it
is.
at the national
I don't
or
think
EU
I
level.
like it.
But some do more than others. For example, you vote for your national representative and therefore contribute to form a national government whose head of state has a seat in the European Council. These leaders choose the president of the EU Commission and its fellow commissioners, who eventually are...
Okay, never mind. I was mistaken. It doesn't sound so
confirmed by the EU Parliament. So this is a sort of indirect democracy. You didn't vote for the Commission, but you voted for the people who appointed them and for those who confirmed and policed them.
That's like what we have in like the Republican, or Democratic Republic over here in the U.S., and how it's like either a complete, direct, 100% democracy would be crazy if you were a complete democracy, any country, which would mean that you vote for everything on the national level and state level every time. And of course, that's crazy. So instead, we have people whose job it is to run as representatives in local, state, and on the national level. And then it's their job, who you can vote out every 2 or 4 years. For some, might be 3, even so. So they make all the decisions so that the average American average citizen doesn't have to look and keep up to date to every small decision in the country on every state, national, local level and vote. That would be insane. And so a Democratic Republic like this, you might not be voting for every policy, but you're voting for people who you think will make good policy choices.
So, in effect, 2.5 of the 4 main European Union institutions depend on the
Let me know
member state
if
governments.
I'm wrong, if any Americans.
But since you, as a citizen, can only directly vote for the European Parliament, the question is, how powerful is it? How much influence does your vote have? The European Parliament started out with very little influence, but has become more and more powerful over the past 2 decades. Today, it has to approve new laws which can be binding for the member countries. It also votes on how the EU budget is spent and on international treaties.
Sorry, what does a binding agreement mean? Binding agreement. A binding is any agreement that's legally a binding. That means if you sign a binding contract and don't fulfill. Binding definition. Okay, so you're... Okay, understood.
All of this
So
makes
these
the
binding decisions mean you will face the consequences if you don't.
Parliament very powerful, and thus your vote very influential, even on an international level. Compared to national parliaments, one major power is still missing, though. The EU Parliament officially can't propose new laws on its own, which is often the core of the argument the EU is not democratic enough and that the European Parliament should be given more influence. Right now, the member states' governments pretty much control the European Union. Giving the Parliament more power would make the EU as a whole more democratic, but it would also take power from member states. It's not clear which approach is.
Isn't that an oxymoron? Paradox?
In Union. Giving the Parliament more power would make the EU as a whole more democratic, but it would also take power from member states. It's not clear.
Okay, so do they mean that, like, power from member states, meaning like large, like Germany, France, would have a lot more say in things if it were the more member state power, and so it'd be unfair if you were like Latvia or Slovenia or something, and the democratic level would mean representatives from each country are appointed?
Clear which approach is better. Ultimately, it's for the member states and us as citizens to decide how the union should develop. Okay, so can we draw a conclusion here? As a whole, the EU is not as democratic as most of its member states, but it is democratic. If you don't like decisions they make, regarding copyright for example, you can look up what your representatives voted for and vote them out. The struggle to make it more democratic is closely tied to who holds power over what. The EU keeps changing. You, dear citizen, are not only voting on the current politics, but also on what the system will look like in the future. There are many parties and politicians that vowed to make the EU Parliament, and therefore your vote, stronger. Many others want...
If I wasn't born there, could I move to a European Union country and vote? Or is that not allowed?
To keep it as it is, or even diminish it. It's for you to decide what you think is better for the future of the Union. Currently, it's equally important for the EU who you vote for at home, because these are the people who have the most influence in the European Union right now. Opinion. At home is also where the EU is often used as a scapegoat. Politicians, especially before national elections, like to pretend the EU is all-powerful and makes up rules and laws over the heads of the governments and citizens, although often they were directly responsible for what the EU did. Democracy at home is also where the EU is often used as a scapegoat. Politicians, especially before national elections, like to pretend the EU is all-powerful and makes up rules and laws over the heads of the governments and citizens, although often they were directly responsible for what the EU did. Democracy is annoying and complicated and often very boring. In the European Union, even more
I don't think it's boring.
so than in the member states. But voting and caring about how our political institutions change and develop is one of the most powerful things we can do as citizens. The last few years have shown that extreme things can happen through elections. We have to decide if we want to be an active part of this process. If we don't take part in the struggle for power that is politics, others will. And we might not like what they decide for us. Because Europe is an important topic for us, we've translated this video into as many European languages as possible. A couple of European YouTubers narrated it and uploaded it to their own channels. Thank you to Funk and all YouTubers who helped us. You can find the playlist with all language versions in the description.
I think I get it. I definitely understood a lot. Oh, okay. See ya.